one of those very unknown letters of
Right
Paul.
after Colossians.
Thessalonians what?
That's
Corinthians.
too far back.
Here's
Oh, that's
Corinthians.
No, it's after the major ones. It's Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, then Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians,
That's
1
Oh my
Thessalonians.
goodness, all the way at the
What
end.
happened to Thessalonians what?
Philemon.
Thessalonians 3.
No, 2.
2.
We're in 1 Thessalonians 2.
It's in the back after
Thank you very
Ephesians.
much. I got it by
Philippians.
chance.
Colossians, and then,
Colossians.
and
There
then-
it is. Maybe because it's not that long.
no, it's not that
That's
long.
what it is.
Sure.
So it's First Thessalonians.
Yeah,
That's
chapter,
what it is. It's only
chapter 2.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
Let's have a word of prayer. We'll jump right in. Thank you, Father, that we can be here this evening. We ask, dear God, that you guide us as we look into your word, illuminate our minds and hearts, and guide our conversation, that everything be for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. So let's read the whole chapter. Well, actually, verses 1 through 12. Sorry, I shouldn't say the whole chapter. 1 through 12 is the section we're in. Rose,
But what chapter?
First Thessalonians chapter 2,
Oh, 2.
verses 1 through 12. Could you read that for us?
Oh, 1 to 12. Okay. Oh, Paul's ministry in Thessalonica. You know, brothers and sisters, that our visit to you was not without results. We had previously suffered and been treated outrageously in Philippi, as you know, but with the help of our God, we dare to tell you his gospel in the face of strong opposition. For the appeal we make does not spring from error or impure motives, nor are we trying to trick you. On the contrary, we speak as those approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. We are not trying to please people, but God, who tests our hearts. You know, we never use flattery, nor do we put on a mask to cover up greed. God is our witness. We were not looking for praise from any human being, not from you or anyone else, even though as apostles of Christ we could have asserted our prerogatives. Instead, we were like young children among you. Just as a nursing mother cares for her children, so we cared for you. Because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Surely you remember, brothers and sisters, our toil and hardship. We worked day and night in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preached the gospel of God to you. You are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory.
Amen. Any initial questions? All right. Then we actually pick up on verse 5 where we left off.
So I do have a thing.
Sure.
So is it that he's kind of rebuking them because other people were going to them and preaching and they were supporting them, or like why is he telling them pretty much that while we were with you, we did what we did for you, but we still had jobs? Like what's?
Well, if you remember in the last lesson I was talking about the sophists people that basically came in and they were professional orators, and they were really trying their best to milk people. And this is what Paul is being accused of. Yeah, milk them. Yeah.
Said? No, I didn't.
Trying to take money from people. They would put on great speeches. They say praise things. The ultimate purpose was to swindle you out of money. And of course, this was a very common thing in the ancient world. But places like Thessalonica, Corinth, these were notorious places where these guys were like, they knew they could make money there, so that's where they were. Especially places like Corinth, which is where Paul is right now as he's writing 1 Thessalonians. He's writing here from Corinth to them. And in Corinth it's even worse. But he's letting them know that this is not true, because this is one of the things that they will see. Think about it. He was there for a short time. The Jews persecuted him. He had to run. And now it looks like, hey, wait a minute. were we hook, you know, did he trick us? You know, did he come in here and was trying to be a charlatan, but he got caught and he had to run away? And they're trying to defame Paul. So Paul is defending his reputation. And of course, one of the things Paul does is that he doesn't take money. He does it on purpose. And we're going to come to some of the reasons why he doesn't do it. But one of them is because of the sophist and that kind of reputation. But there are other reasons. For example, Paul doesn't take money because he doesn't want the gospel to be compromised. He doesn't want it to be associated like, oh, you're swindlers. He also doesn't want to be controlled. The fact is, when somebody pays you, they think they own you. And that's a reality. And that goes, I've known poor pastors that have been in horrible conditions because the church is basically threatening them. You know, if you do this, you'll lose your job, you and your family will be out of the parsonage, and blah, blah, blah. And they lived in fear, especially if I remember this one guy that was a pastor, and I felt so bad for him because I knew he had a situation in his church, and he wanted me to help him, but I couldn't help him because I knew what needed to be done. There was a deacon, the son of a deacon was living in adultery, and it had to be dealt with. But this pastor was from Guatemala. He had been brought from Guatemala to be part of the Spanish church, and they basically owned him. The deacons owned him. If he tried anything, they would just fire you, and you would end up being homeless, probably end up back in Guatemala. So he had to basically swallow his pride and actually compromise the gospel. So yeah, one of the things Paul does is that he wants to make sure you can't own me. And also back in the ancient world, actually I'm jumping ahead, so when I want to get there, I won't mention this. In the ancient world, if you can have someone as your own private teacher. Like Corinth wanted to have Paul as their own, to own him. That's why Paul definitely did not allow them at all to support Corinth. He accepted gifts from certain places like Philippi. The Philippians did actually give him money and stuff like that, and he accepted from them because of their friendship, because of who they were. But Corinth wanted to pride themselves on owning the people. You know, I'm of Paul, I'm of Peter, I'm of Apollo. They wanted ownership, and so he's like, nope. So that's some of the reasons why Paul would not engage in that. But here, of course, it's a lot of connection. Here is not so much as being owned as the sophist. And we'll see it because of the first two words he talks about in verse 5, with flattery and greed. Any other question?
Yeah. Can they hear with the AC on?
Who?
The recording.
Hey, can you guys hear with the AC on?
That sounds good.
Now I was thinking that too as I was reading. That's
Sounds good.
why we have to speak
I
up.
mean, I thought you were talking about me. Can
If I was on the phone, that never would have happened.
That's right.
That's right.
But it's a good point. I
She
tried to
was
speak up
referring
when I
to
read.
me. I said, have I lost my
So
ear?
funny. Oh man. Oh.
Such a smarty pants.
Oh,
Hi, how you doing?
Oh, hi, hello,
Hi.
I sit down.
Hi, did you ever watch the movie Pollyanna, the original Walt Disney movies?
No.
Do you
They were,
Oh,
the
yeah.
pastor was afraid of the rich
I don't want
lady.
to cause a breaking.
I see, yeah, of course.
So you have to put together. I usually say the thing that people wouldn't say. Sorry.
It is.
So I guess they can hear now.
Yeah, no, that was, well, you know
You're
what?
a regular Einstein.
I thought you were referring to me. Can I hear? And I said, what did I
First
have to
Thessalonians
go?
2.
Here, actually,
Verses 1
it's
through 12.
159.
That we actually just read, and we just actually just talked about the issue
We just
about
started.
why Paul was so adamant in talking about not accepting money. And as we mentioned a few weeks ago, the sophist was one of the reasons, but others were that if you basically had like a private tutor or something like that, you basically owned the person. So he didn't want that. He wanted to be free, and he didn't want the gospel to be judged. But he could accept money. We're going to get to that issue as well, because actually that was part of the gospel mandate to support those in ministry. And it starts with Jesus. We're going to find Jesus was like that, and he allowed this. So we're going to talk about why Paul himself did not follow in that path. Any questions? All right. So 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 5, we're going to start there, which we left off, says, You know we never use flattery, nor do we put on a mask to cover up greed. God is our witness. Flattery was, of course, for the sake of self-interest. When somebody in the ancient world is using flattery, maybe just like today, of course, they're not doing it because they really want to lift you up. It's really because they want to lift themselves up, and they want to, make money or have you somehow praise them or say they're great, whatever. So, and this was again a very common thing in the ancient world, where the sophists were very well known for that. And Dio Chrysostom, who was an orator in that time, he himself talked about how this was a disguise for greed, and talked about these traveling orators who go from place to place trying to make a buck. And we're going to read a quote from Dio Chrysostom himself, where he attacks that mindset. Aristotle states, "The man who joins in gratifying people for the sake of getting something for himself in the way of money or money's worth is a flatterer." So this is a very common thing in the ancient world. They knew that this is, this is their format. But again, there were professional people who were doing this. Greed is, of course, what they're aiming at. But greed is not just wanting to have. It's wanting to have and not caring that it's at the expense of someone else. That's greed. And actually there's a distinction between just having this type of greed as opposed to just saying, oh, I desire something, where you lust for something. You desire to have it. But this one is saying, I don't care at all what happens to anybody else. I don't care, I don't care if you end up being homeless. I don't care if you end up being dead, as long as I get what I want.
Some high degree of greed.
Which is what I think what true greed comes down to. True greed is wanting something so badly that you're not really thinking about the repercussions at all about what's going to happen to anybody. As long as I get what I want, who cares? All right, so he ended up homeless. All right, so they ended up dead. So who cares? I got what I wanted. William Barclay explains it very well in his book on the New Testament. He says, "It is the sin of the man who has allowed full play to desire to have what he should not have, who thinks his desires and appetites and lusts are the most important thing in the world, who sees others as things to be exploited, who has no God except himself and his desires." That captures it well. They don't care. All they care about is fulfilling their desires, getting what they want, and whatever it takes, they will do it. So when he uses this language, they know what he's talking about. In Mark chapter 7, verse 20 to 23, Jesus states, "What comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed," same Greek word, "malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person." So Paul's saying, this is not who we were. So whatever it is people want to claim about us, even though they had to leave Thessalonica quickly, and we're going to find in the next section why he had to leave quickly. Of course, we know it's because of Jews. And we're actually going to get a very emotional picture of Paul in the next section. He says, whatever people want to say about us, we weren't doing it for greed, because we weren't getting any money. You weren't paying us a penny. We were self-supporting ourselves. We were working by, in my trade to support myself. So during the day, Paul was working just like every other person would work, and he had to make time for his ministry either at night or during the time when he's doing the shop. If somebody comes in, whatever. But he worked to make a living. There were people supporting him. Like I said, the church in Philippi is known to have support, and he accepted from them, but not from others, because again, it's perception. And the Philippians, when we get to that letter, you'll see that he had just a great friendship, a real, authentic friendship with that church, as opposed to Corinth, which was always a combative relationship. Corinth just gave him trouble no matter what stage, because if you read 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians, it's trouble. And even when you read after that, because I'm always curious after what happened after Paul. When you read Clement of Rome, who has to write a letter to a church in Corinth, he's still rebuking them about the problems that they have in that church. So it wasn't like Paul was the end of their problems. They kept having problems even after Paul. We're talking Paul died around 67 AD. Clement wrote around 90 AD. So 15 years later, 10, 15 years, they're still having problems in that church. So, very differences in churches.
I have a couple of questions.
Hmm.
First, who are the people bad talking him? Because they're not the Jews. They are.
Yes. In this case, it is the Jews. In this case, it is the Jews who are bad mouthing him. They have literally, it's like a Monty Python skit almost. Where you remember those skits where you saw a guy running and the whole crowd kind of following him around no matter where he went. This is what, no matter where Paul goes, there are the Jews. They're following him. Now, why they didn't follow him to Corinth is interesting. Because in Corinth, maybe they knew they weren't going to have the same kind of influence. Maybe there weren't enough Jews or something there because
Well, they knew the group.
he was able to stay in Corinth for a while. But in other places, Berea, he had to run. Here he has to run. Thessalonica, he only stays about a few weeks, and he has to run constantly on the move.
So
Because-
are they the what is it? The Sadducees, the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, like who?
Most likely Pharisaical.
Okay.
The Sadducees wouldn't care. The Pharisees, again, probably from his own kind of group. Remember, this is what Paul was like. This is Paul. This is what Paul would have been doing. Remember, Paul was in Jerusalem persecuting, and then when people are running for the hills, he actually gets letters so he can go to Damascus because he heard there's a group there. Let's go hunt them down over there. So this guy's bad, And now he's the one being hunted by the same kind of group. And if you read the book of Acts, towards the end, you find out there's a whole group of men who even take a vow. We're not going to eat until we kill Paul. Yeah, it's like, well, actually, they must have starved to death if they kept that vow because they weren't able to kill him. He was able to get away under them by Roman authority. They took him out of there and spared him. But yeah, there were literally men who had made a vow. We're not going to eat until we kill this guy. So and this group is following Paul to harass him. And here, of course, in Thessalonica, they can't do it through Jewish people because he's actually reached out more to Gentiles, and the Gentile church is growing. So what they're doing is influencing the Gentiles to get the Gentiles to turn on him as well. And we see that even after Paul leaves Thessalonica, those who become Christian in Thessalonica are now being persecuted also by Gentiles who most likely have been influenced by the Jews to torment these poor souls and make their life miserable.
So my next question was, the sophists, right?
Yes.
That were coming in and preaching.
Yes.
Were they preaching anti-Christianity per se, or
No.
it's just that?
No, on the contrary, that's not how they made the money. They made their money by they would come in and sing praises. Let's say they came to Cliffside Park. They might give a beautiful recite spontaneously because that was the power of what they had. It wasn't simply that they could do what they did; it's that they were so haughty, so cocky, that they believed, to be able to walk into a place like right now and just start creating a poem out of nowhere that talks about the greatness of Cliffside Park, mentioning historical facts, putting things in, putting that, and being able to, praise the mayor, praise this person. And they did this, and they would do it on the spot. So much so that one time a guy, one of them tried to give a speech that he had given somewhere else, and they started mocking him and laughing at him and booing him because, we've heard that before. Come on, they knew it was fabricated already. So but this was the part of their pride, and so they would go in, and once they sang praise and this that, people, of course, in the ancient world, just like today, you say, let's send my kids to Ivy League school. Well, if I send them to study under this guy, he will teach them to be a great orator. That'd be great if they're going to be a lawyer. That's great if they're going to be in a Senate. Whatever position they're going to have, that's an awesome thing to do. And this guy is that good, we want him. So they would do that. As opposed to the philosophers. Don't confuse them with philosophers. Philosophers were the deep thinkers. And they would have looked at the sophists like, whoa, what a horrible group. You can go back to Plato, and Plato's hates them. You know, so that's how long it had been around already. And again, the ancient world is not like our times where things are constantly shifting. Things don't shift much in the ancient world. You know, there's a great stability there. And these people were around for a long time, and they were hated by people that were professionals like philosophers. But they were admired by people who wanted to make a quick buck as well, or wanted to train their children to have a certain kind of profession. But they wouldn't care about Paul or what Paul was doing. But what's happening is that the Jewish people are associating Paul in the minds of others with the sophists. Meaning, if I want to defame you, all I have to do is associate you to the criminal. You know, even if you weren't the criminal. You know, even if I hadn't committed the crime, you're like, yeah, but he was there, and he was friends with that guy, and look at him. Don't you see the same kind of patterns? You know, so this is why Paul has to be the way he is. Any questions? Oh, and of course, in the early church, things got so crazy because people, of course, taking advantage of others. Not in the form of greed, because greed is an extremity, but even in the sense of trying to take advantage of others. That towards the end of the first century, there's a book called the Didache, which means the teaching of the 12, and it's on instructions on how to live the Christian life. And one of them is about people coming in and claiming to be Christians. And I remember it says that if a person comes, it says they're an apostle. If they stay for 1 or 2 days, bless you. They say if they stay for 1 or 2 days, okay, they're an apostle. It says if they stay for a third day, they're a false prophet. Because people, again, they're taking advantage of Christianity. They're taking advantage of Christians. They know Christians are known for their hospitality. You come in claiming to be an apostle. Oh, come in, I have an extra room, have some food. Right. Yes, but then if they stay more than 2 days, they're liars. You can throw them out. Mm-hmm. That's how bad it got, you know, for the early church, that people were swindling Christians and taking advantage of their generosity and hospitality.
But that's ruining in something for someone who is honest. Because then you're saying that if a true apostle comes in, and, you know, let's say Paul comes in 2 days and he's really, you know, moving people and transforming, like his message is transforming lives, not saying, oh, dude, you got to get out of here before they start thinking that you're a crook. The third day, you know, cutting short his message, his opportunity for.
Oh yeah, and Paul would stay for months. Yeah. He stayed a year and a half in Ephesus, because his whole thing was to go into a place and establish a church. And you can't establish a church overnight. You can't do it in 2 days. You have to start a church, then train the leaders, and once they're trained and they're doing what they're supposed to do, then you can move on. And that would be his ideal. But obviously in Thessalonica he couldn't do it. He had to bail because of the persecution. But in certain places like Corinth and Ephesus, he has the time to do that. But again, by this time the church is very well established, and someone claiming to be an apostle, yeah, they could be swindlers. There was a lot of that. I mean, there was a guy named, even later on, a guy named Lucian who hates Christianity. And he's pretty much an atheist. He doesn't care about anything. But he even feels sorry for Christians because he realized they're being swindled that way. Because he had a friend who really got into big financial problems, and the Christians bail him out. And they help him, they take him in, they clean him up, they take care of all his stuff, and then once he's back on his feet, he leaves them. And he's like, yeah, they're suckers. But he still says it in honesty, even though he hates Christians, he's still honest that they're known for this kind of behavior.
Was he a no-nonsense man?
Who?
Paul.
Oh.
Well, there's definitely, I think, a big difference in the personalities between him and Peter. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Peter, I think, was the type of guy that laughed a lot, whereas Paul might have been a little stuffy.
Maybe. Yeah, Paul was definitely tough. Don't forget that, remember in the first missionary tour that he went with Barnabas, they took John Mark, which is Barnabas' cousin, who wrote the gospel. And he bails out. Right. The pressure's too much for him. He's young.
Right, he held it against him.
And then when they're going to go on a second missionary tour, Barnabas wants to again take John Mark wants to go again. And Paul says, nope, not with me.
It's like the people who yell a lot and explode a lot, they're more forgiving than the person who is very patient, and then I think he's less forgiving. The person who, like the boss is always yelling at you,
Mhm.
you can, I think, get into an argument with him, and he's not, next time he sees you, everything's gotten, whereas the boss is very quiet.
But think about it this way.
The temperaments.
You're a military man. Think about it this way. Would you want somebody on the field, the military field, who was flip-flop?
No.
Who would chicken out on you in the last minute?
No.
That's kind of why Paul's like this.
Okay.
Because this is not a, gee, we're going on a retreat or a camp, or it's just, or even it's like it's First Baptist in Cliffside Park.
Right.
This is hardcore.
Yeah, beaten up. And
People are getting beaten up, we're
Yeah.
dying, you know. I can't have somebody who's gonna bail out.
Right, he needs to trust him.
I need somebody who if it comes down to dying, we're both gonna die together.
Yeah,
It's not like you're gonna be recanting or like, giving away all the secrets.
You're right,
you know?
right.
And for Christians, this becomes very critical because in the early church, again, they have to hide in the catacombs. They have to live in fear of being persecuted. You can't have somebody who's going to whimper out and say, "Oh yeah, I know where all of them are over there."
Yeah.
So he's very in that sense. But when you look at his history, he's not a man that can't change. By the time he writes Colossians, if you look at the end of Colossians, he talks about, have Mark come to me.
Yeah.
He's been very helpful to me.
Right.
So Mark does prove himself. He does, he does get back on his feet. Obviously, he writes the gospel. He's well known for that. And actually, he writes the gospel because after being with Barnabas, according to church history, he ends up with Peter. And what the Gospel of Mark becomes is like the stories of Peter. Peter tells him the tales because John Mark, of course, would not have been part of that generation. He was a young man. He would not know Jesus or the disciples firsthand. Well, he wasn't with them. But once he hangs out with Paul first, that doesn't work out too well. But then he hangs out with Peter, and that seems to work out pretty well. And he writes down the gospel, and of course, he becomes well known in the faith, so much well that Paul says, "Hey, send him to me, I need him." So yeah, Paul can change, but I think he lived in that kind of intensity.
Well, he probably had his temperament, right? I remember Charlie Rizzo did a thing on the temperaments, that the pros and cons, and if you act this way, the person's going to know how else you're going to act when he learns the temperaments.
Yeah.
The Greeks gave it to us. He said it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, he definitely had a much stronger character. He really wouldn't take much nonsense. I guess you're right. He wouldn't.
It's like that.
He's very tough. Very.
Right.
He's the kind of guy it's like it's the kind of guy you're like, oh yeah, we love reading. For me, it's like, oh, I love reading, studying, but he really is intense. If you're with him, I guess.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be like the kind of guy that's like all fluffy and let's go to the movies and everything's cool. I think I always see him like a man who's like a man on a mission. Just.
Okay.
Well, he was killing people, hunting people, so that says it so right there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, didn't he talk so long that why the guy fell out the window? He was
Yeah,
getting bored.
Yeah, it's like Eutychus fell asleep. Poor young man sitting on a window listening to Paul. I think it was for like 3 hours something. And then, poof. Yeah, it's like,
I don't know that one.
you know that one? Yeah, it's in the Book of Acts. Yeah,
Oh,
Poor
no,
Eutychus.
Yeah.
Sad story. Well, a happy ending. He brings him.
He brought him back to life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
think of the pain, though. I mean,
yeah.
That's like when Abraham, all right, he knew God was going to bring his son back, and even if Isaac knew it, I still wouldn't want somebody sticking a knife in my chest, even though I knew I was coming right back to life.
Yeah. Well, he never did stick the knife in his chest.
Right, but I'm saying he believed he was going to come back. But
Yeah.
think of the pain you're going to endure. No.
Yeah. But yeah, Paul was definitely intense. So he says, we're not flatterers, we're not into greed. And then he says, God is our witness. The invoking of God or the gods, whatever, as a witness to human behavior was a long-standing practice. We see it in the Bible. But Paul, of course, doesn't do it lightly. Paul's not like one of these people like say, someone's talking to you, no, I swear to God, it's true. No, Paul would never misuse the name of God and would never take the name of God lightly. So when he says that, he really is invoking God as a witness to the integrity of what he's saying. That he's not a swindler, that he's not dishonest, that this kind of person he is. So, I mean, to call God as his witness, it's like, that's like, wow. You know, it's like someone say, hey, man, you know, it's like saying, you know, it's like your mom's passed away. It's like, no, I swear about my mom. You're like, you're going for like deep emotional roots that people realize, you know, you're not lying. You're being authentic. And so he brings that in. Any question? All right, verse 6 to 7, to the beginning of verse 7 says, we were not looking for praise from people, not from you or anyone else. Even though as apostles of Christ we could have asserted our authority, indeed we were like young children among you. They were not seeking verbal praise from the Thessalonians. Again, Dio Chrysostom, here I'm going to quote him from a speech that he gave in Alexandria, half-century later. He says, but to find a man who in plain terms and without guile speaks his mind with frankness, and neither for the sake of reputation nor for gain makes false pretensions, but out of good will and concern for his fellow man stands ready, if need be, to submit to ridicule and to the disorder and the uproar of the mob. I feel that I have chosen that role, not of my own volition, but by the will of some deity. This is the kind of person I'm not looking for your praise. I'm looking to do what I do because it's the right thing to do. Now for Paul, he would not say, I'm doing it just because it's the right thing to do. He would say, I'm looking for the praise of God. You know, if he's looking for someone's approval, there's only one. He really does not care, ultimately, what anyone thinks about him.
That takes courage, too.
Yeah, that takes courage. But that's a great way of living. Yeah. In 1 Corinthians 4, he really outlines and says, you know what? I don't care what anybody thinks about me. I don't even care what I think about me. Only what God thinks about me is what matters. Now that's deep. You got to take that in. That's very deep. Because he's saying, even if I think I'm a good person or my conscience is clear, who cares? It's only what God says that matters. See, God really knows me. God really knows my heart. And so my concern is Him. And to please Him, not anyone else. And that really is the way Paul lives. And that is his complete mind. Any question?
Yeah, is this whole thing basically him saying I'm legitimate?
Oh yeah, yeah. But he has to spell it out.
Right, that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
It's all about this is all legitimate. He's not doing it for any other reason.
That's
but
right.
The gospel.
Yeah. And again, if you don't say it, you know, it's like a lesson you learn in life that you may imagine people know you, but you can't take no chances when your reputation's on the line. And you say, you know what? No. You know, I have integrity, and sometimes you have to spell it out. And it almost sounds like you're defending yourself, but that's what you got to do. Even though he could have claimed his authority as an apostle. In other words, he says, you know, I could use my weight and use my authority to do the things I do. And as a minister of the gospel, he could have demanded that they take care of him. Jesus had given this authority to his followers when he sent them out to minister. In Luke chapter 10, verse 7 says, when he's talking to the apostles, stay there, eating and drinking whatever they give you, for the worker deserves his wages. And in Matthew, the food becomes the wages. But it's very clear that when Jesus commissioned people to go out, he intended that those they would minister to would support that person. Why doesn't Paul then? But Paul's not trying to disobey Jesus because it wasn't a command. What Paul's telling us by his lifestyle is that yes, it's an option. You are called to support me, but I have the right, if I want to say no thank you. That's really what he's doing. But he doesn't want to take it away from other people who are being supported in the ministry. And there are others being supported, like in 1 Corinthians 9 where it talks about, don't I have a right to this, don't I have a right to that? Yes, he had the same rights that all the other apostles had. But he purposely chose not to. Again, there's no command from Christ that says you have to. It's not like he said, when you go to town, you got to accept whatever he give you. No, they didn't have to. And Paul knew that what he was doing was not as simple as it was when Jesus was preaching and it was really among the Hebrew people. And it's your own community, your own people. Now he's going as a Jew to Gentiles. there's a lot of issues, all these sophists, all these things. So he's taking a different tact when it comes to how to deal with the situation. But again, it's because he chooses not to. And like I said, there are numerous reasons, which I outlined already before, why he didn't do it. Any question there? The word young children, I don't know if you guys all have the NIV, of course, but other translations have that we were gentle among you.
We were like young children.
Yeah, which really sounds weird. Why are you like children among them? But in the Greek, the problem is that the difference between young child and gentle is a question of an N. One N. Wow. Oh, I went like this. Yeah, an N is like this, but an N in Greek is like this. So it's just one N. So obviously it fell out or was taken out. Because again, let's say, a scribe, most likely the oldest evidence is for young children. The oldest manuscripts have young children. What appears is there must have been a scribe that said, this doesn't make sense. And so they fixed it. So they thought they were fixing it by taking out the N and making it gentle rather than young children. But most likely it is young children. That is what he's trying to say to them. What he means, of course, is that when the way they were among these people had a kind of like youthfulness, innocence. There was no guilt. There was no, like when you're like young children, you don't have vile. You don't have ulterior motives. He says this is the way we were among you. That's what he means. We had that kind of innocence among you. We're not, we weren't crooked. But again, for some early scribe, what appears is that they probably couldn't make sense of it, and they probably thought somebody else made a mistake. Again, it's not in the ancient world. It's not like they have 10,000 manuscripts in front of them. They probably only had one. He probably, probably the scribe doing it probably only has one manuscript that he's copying, and he probably sees it and thinks somebody made a mistake. Somebody copied this incorrectly and put that in there, so let me just take it out. But once he makes that error gets copied by somebody else. That's how manuscripts become. But we have enough evidence to show that the earliest ones have the N, and this is what he's referring to. And we'll see he's going to jump to he's going to use 3 different illustrations. He's going to say we were like young children. He says we're like nursing mother, and we're like fathers. And all of them have a purpose. Paul is a man of metaphors. He really is, and he doesn't care. He's not like, I'm going to apologize because I'm going to shift metaphors. I love when I'm reading a metaphor of his where he's like talking about like foundation, then he talks about growth like a plant, and you're like, Paul, you're talking about a foundation. Now you're growing like a plant. Because there's no, it's like that's just the way he is. And he'll constantly shift that way. And here he goes through 3 different metaphors to explain what his situation. Any question? All right, 7b to 8. Just as a nursing mother cares for her children, so we cared for you. Because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Now, the passage could refer to a mother or one entrusted with the children of others, but because he says for her children, it's obvious that he's talking about his own children. Notice that Paul, despite the fact that he's attacked by feminists as being very anti-woman, he has no problem using feminine metaphors for himself. There's a fantastic book by Beverly Gaventa called Paul, Our Mother, where she deals with all these different metaphors that he actually uses that were feminine to talk about himself and his own ministry. And here he is, the way he cares for believers is like a nursing mother. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 19, he says, "My dear children, from whom I am again in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you." They're his children. And the fact that they are departing from the faith in Galatians and they're about to go back, and they're going actually into Judaism, he feels like he's got labor pains again. I'm going through the whole process of seeing you being born for the first time. This is so, it's a horrific time he's going through where he feels like, like seeing your children depart from the faith where you're training them and guiding them and they're heading something else. And he's like, I feel like I'm in labor again. And we're going through the whole process again. So again, he has no problem with these metaphors to talk about himself in a feminine way.
Yeah, but I think that comes across to the fact that any person who truly cares about someone else,
Mm.
you see them kind of as like your own, your child,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
So even if you have a friend that you truly care about and they're doing something wrong and you know it's harmful to them, like it breaks your heart. It's not your child, but because you love and care about that person,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have that reaction.
Yeah.
Like my niece is not like my niece, but you know, like I feel for her like she was my own. And
Yeah.
I have never had kids. I don't know what that feels like, but I can imagine that through her. I've been there her whole life.
Mm.
So you kind of, you know, develop that parental
Mhm.
attachment.
But take it one level more, because you're still a woman. Imagine a man talking as a woman. Imagine if a man expressed himself as he's heartbroken, as a woman would be heartbroken. Bless
God
you.
bless you.
We might look at that as effeminate. We might look at that as like a form of weakness. You don't expect a man really. You expect the man more to be angry and maybe self-righteous and you know how dare you, you know, you've betrayed me almost, you know. For a man to be more like betrayal and you're supposed to be you call yourself my child, how dare you, you know. But yet for him he's actually reacting like as a woman would react. Now of course the culture he's in is not like our culture, and maybe men were more expressive that way. I don't know enough about that to say that whether men were more expressive in that being in tune with their emotions, as opposed to American men who are not in tune with their emotions.
I was just wondering precisely that how was he taken when he would make an expression like that as a mother or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's his experience about having given birth to her? How would, you know, that is kind of daring to talk like that.
Yeah.
But I was wondering how do they take it, because
Well, I don't know how. I really don't know how the Jewishness of it would affect it. I know that in the Greco-Roman world, men were not. It was not looked upon. They should not be effeminate. They should be masculine. A man should be a man. They still have the same kind of mentality that we have about man being a man. And anytime a man looked effeminate, it was a sign of weakness. And but again, I don't know the culture. I don't know this aspect of the culture well enough.
I wasn't referring much as
how people would
how feminine he would look like, but it was sort of how was it be taken by the culture that he's talking about something that I had no idea. I mean, being a first a woman and second the mother of you know.
Well, no, because I mean, within again, it's even if you don't have it, even if you don't have that first-hand experience, we constantly use metaphors to which we're not related to at all. For example, look, if I'll give you a great example. I was just talking to when I was talking to Michael here. We constantly use battlefield imagery. You know, when we sing about being like soldiers for Christ or being in the battlefield. Imagine a Navy SEAL sat with us. He'd probably be looking at us like, you have no idea. You have no idea what real combat is like. You know, but it's a metaphor. We constantly use metaphors for ourselves of things that we really, you know, I'm a warrior. You know, let me say this much. I've been watching this program on Navy SEALs. I don't think I'm ever going to say I'm a warrior. Because these guys are like, wow, I feel so like, wow. You know, I remember even in my sermons, I used to use the illustration like, well, if you want something simple, join the military. Don't become a Christian. I used to say that. I don't say that. You don't hear me say that anymore. Because I've been like, wow, these guys just like, this is hardcore. But metaphor is something that we constantly use. You know, but if you really want to talk about tenderness and that kind of affection, there's nothing closer than a mother. You know, how do you express that without saying, you know, this is how I feel about you? And so I think he's using it correctly. I don't know how it will be taken in the ancient world. I still don't know enough about that aspect. And I'm trying to remember Gaventa's book, because she's very good at cultural things. I have to look. Go through the notes again and see if she mentions how the culture itself perceived him when he used it. I have to go back and check that out.
You mean how the Thessalonians did?
Well, the culture itself. How? For example, I know that certain things that he says will be taken from the Greco-Roman aspect as like weakness. For example, Aristotle is well known for saying that if you have like humility, it's weakness. Meekness to them is like, psh, you're a rug. They would never look at that as a high quality. That's a quality to be avoided, because that's the quality of a slave. A slave has to be meek because they got no choice. You know, we are aristocrats. And of course, Aristotle, no matter how much he's trying to write, he's not thinking about himself as like a commoner. He's a philosopher. He's an aristocrat. So this is the way true men live. This is the way we're supposed to be. You know, that's the mentality of slaves. And they would never. So when Paul talks about I glory in my weakness, oh no, we don't. No, we don't. That's what weaklings say, not what the strong would say. We glory in our strength. So there's things like that, but I don't know how this one in particular would tackle. I got to check go into Gavender's book again.
For people who think the regular sailors have it easy, they have no idea that when these sailors are out to sea, 6 days a week they're working 12 to 16 hours.
Oh
a day.
yeah.
You know, they don't see that in the movie. 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 days.
Oh
a week.
yeah.
That's not easy.
Oh, just like
Anybody.
now when I fathom things, I'm like, oh, you know, like I think these guys want to, like, let's say in a submarine. Oh no, get me out of here, man, get me out of here. It's like 1 day is like in this hollow tube. No, out of here now. I can't even imagine it now, you know. But you know, when I was younger, I would be thinking, oh, you know, anybody can do that. And you're like, no, wow, this is intense. But again, these are metaphors we use that would express the intensity of being in combat, being in battle. And Paul is again, he uses a lot of metaphors. There's a whole book written on all the metaphors Paul uses, and it's just like amazing. You're like, you know, the book is like this big. He constantly uses metaphors to express thoughts. Any other questions? But not only we give our, share the gospel, but we give our lives as well. The word there is suke, which is the normal word used for soul. Which he gave himself completely. Which of course, the charlatans, the false teachers would never do that. They would never care about other people and give themselves for the people. You know, they gave their beautiful rhetoric to get money, but they would never give their lives, their very being, as sacrificially. And Paul says, you know, I would die for you guys. I'm still willing to die for you guys. So
wasn't he willing to go to hell if it was save all the other Jews?
Yes.
And you think he was really mean?
Oh, I think he meant it.
To go in lake of fire forever, so
I think
everybody else can go to heaven?
Yeah. I think he would be willing to forfeit his own salvation.
Not me.
Yeah. Okay, but maybe not on that level. But let's say it was for your mother. You know, someone, the one you love the most.
Even that's scary.
Well, no, it's scary. Well, it's not up to Paul anyhow.
Right.
It's not,
I know. But
it's not like God's going to go there and go, yeah, sure, I'll take you up on that. Yeah, it's like, but yeah, he's speaking sincerely that yes, he would forfeit himself. He'd be willing to give his own soul to see the salvation of others.
Yeah, I think a parent, like well, I would assume a dad, but a parent, I think about when a parent loses their child because of tragedy or even illness, a child dies. I think any parent in a heartbeat would
trade places.
Probably mostly the mother too, right?
Hey, oh, the father too.
Well, I'm always hearing about, mother.
Hey, you see, it goes from the motherly. You have to express it in the motherly way, or no one's going to believe that you would have the same emotion that a mother would
because they're always saying how the mother carries. They planted this.
Well, no, it's true. Mothers have a bond with a child that a father cannot recreate.
And the father with the daughter and the son with the mother.
But either way, no matter what child you have, The mother has a bond with that. When Abby I never had Abby 9 months in my belly, moving around and kicking me.
That
and
makes a difference, by the way.
And actually, this is not simply somebody that you give birth to. It's actually inside of you, and you're nurturing this life, and this life is actually connected to your life, and this life is actually taking life from you to create its own life. It's really intense.
Well, if I offended you in any way, I apologize.
No. Yeah, I don't get offended. I'm a man.
I always think of that God in His wisdom, I think He decided to do about motherhood something so special that there's no other way to describe it, and the connection is there no matter what.
Yeah. But notice that with God, although He has all the emotions of a mother, He calls Himself Father. And like I said, I think one of the main reasons, undeniably, is because of that symbiotic union. God didn't create something from within Himself. He created something outside Himself. It's not like it's not pantheism. It's not like everything is God. You look, oh, this is God, that's God, that's God. Where a child, like think about when you see earth religions, like I was watching recently, what was that famous movie, James Cameron movie about the blue people.
Avatar. Love that movie.
Notice they talk about Mother Earth. Mother Earth. We're all connected. We're all bonded. See, God, no. A father is not bonded to a child the way a mother is bonded to a child. A father is over here. A mother is here with the child. God calls Himself Father. His creation is distinct from Him. Although He creates it, it's not Him. It's not like you say, oh my goodness, that tree is part of God. No. It's something created by Him, but it doesn't have that kind of symbiotic union. And I think it's one of the reasons He is called Father, not Mother. Because again, Mother, it's like you see people who are pantheistic, and they go, oh, God is everything. God is, No, He's not. There's an actual distinction between Him and creation, because creation is finite. He's infinite. We came into being. He never came into being. We were created. That's why I said that He was created out of nothing. The Bible, teaches.
Do you think we'll ever understand that? I'm sorry, I mean to cut.
No.
Do you think we'll ever understand when we get to heaven? I can't fathom, no matter how far you go back, that He's still there.
Mm-hmm.
It's too.
Well, because we are creatures that had a beginning.
Right.
We don't comprehend a creature that did not have a beginning.
Right. That was always there.
That was always there.
It's like, other than Jesus and the Holy Spirit, that was probably His only fellowship.
That's it. That's it.
You think He could have made them look the way He wanted to, so it would be more like being with somebody?
No, I think He was with somebody.
Yeah, I know He was with somebody.
No. I really believe. I know some people have a problem with God as being 3 in 1. I know they have a problem with that.
No, I don't have a problem with but I'm saying, could He had to make it less? I don't know. I shouldn't say boring. To make it more interesting for Himself. Could He see Jesus look another way?
But the way you're saying it's almost again that He can create the way they are, and He can't create the way they are because they've always been.
Oh, so they can't look different.
No, they are Him. They are part of Him, and they are Him. They share the same essence, right. Even though they have distinction from Him. Right. They're still the same essence. He didn't make them.
Right. But He can't look at them,
and He cannot formulate them.
Right. So He can't look at them and see a friend that He would see millions of years later. In other words,
no.
What it was is what it was.
They are who they are.
Right. I have no problem with 3 in 1. I'm just wondering if I don't. You can't. I can't.
Right, but again, it's not like the Father is somehow here and they're over here. Right. They literally share the same essence. So it's like no. Again, there's nothing in our world.
Oh, they don't have different personalities?
No. Well, they have their own personality, but they're identical.
Oh.
It's like 3 of you.
It was a good joke.
It's a good joke.
Yeah.
But again, there's nothing. Some things like I like the way Aquinas he didn't use the word, he didn't use the term that I'm going to use, but somebody commenting on Aquinas did, he said, these are things that are transrational. There are things that we can explain within our own universe because there are analogies that correlate. There is no analogy for the Trinity in our world.
So
and everybody's tried to come up with an analogy of, like, husband, wife, child, ice that is water, frozen, blah, blah, mist, and they tried all kinds, but there is no analogy
So they were just
within our existence.
They were just in a non-existent, the three of them for the time, right? Because they didn't make nothing yet, so it was just the three of
That's
them
right.
in a non-existence.
Well, they are existent.
No, they are existent, but there's nothing else. It was
Nothing
just
else,
those
yeah.
three, nothing
Yeah,
to stand
yeah.
on, nothing.
That's right. Well, there's still nothing to stand on for them.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
They're still them.
Oh, okay. But I don't know.
God is spirit.
Right.
God is not bound. It's not like God's arm is here and God's legs over there.
But Jesus is.
The
right?
fullness of who God is everywhere.
But Jesus was he a person like?
Yes,
touch?
he became.
Oh, he
a
became.
Yeah, no.
Before he was like the Father then.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
In the beginning was the Word.
Right.
And the Word
So
was
he
with God, and the Word was God.
and then it became. Oh, all right. All right.
Yeah, he takes on a form.
Oh, okay. But now he's got it. He's going to keep it, right?
Yes, he keeps it, but again, he's not
Right.
limited by it.
You think he's better off now that he can keep it?
No,
No.
no.
He can play baseball now, and you know what I'm saying? He can do things, touch. Run
See,
for
because
touchdowns.
you're a physical being,
Right. Yeah.
and that's why you think physicality is the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
You know, if you were God, you would not be thinking that.
I don't know. When I just picture the spirits, just.
Because we think it backwards.
Oh, okay.
Let's say, let's say the spirit is the more concrete thing.
Right.
You're the shadow. We are the limited, not him.
Oh yeah, that.
You know, again, we think backwards. A great book is by C.S. Lewis called The Great Divorce, where it's a fantasy trip from hell to heaven, and when they get to heaven, everything is more tangible than anything anywhere else.
Right.
Like like the ground is thicker than it was anywhere else.
Oh,
A fruit is better than it was anywhere else.
Like colors are brighter.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's that. We always think this is the intense. No, the intense is over there. God, to God, we really are limited. We're
I'm only at best somewhere within only 30 or 40 years of finding all this out.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right.
that's the great thing about when you get old. It's like, in 20 years, if I'm alive, I'd be 80. So whether he comes soon or not, I'm going soon.
I want to make sure how much I got right between
Yeah. I got so many questions.
here and my death. I want to see how much. By the time I get to heaven, find out. Oh yeah, wow, I came pretty close. But again, the Trinity is one of those things that it really is amazing. But there is no analogy.
Very complex.
No analogy.
No matter how you look
But
at it.
I'm telling you, it's worth studying, because I think that the greater cloudiness for people is that they haven't studied it. I think when you study it, you begin to realize, like for example, if you take a good book on the Trinity and you study it, you see how they all do share the same qualities. It's like, when it talks about being omnipresent, all three of them are said to be omnipresent. Now, if all three are omnipresent, they have to be the same. I mean, there are things like that. Or many things that are said about Jesus in the New Testament are things that are said about God in the Old Testament, God the Father.
Right.
So there's that, but yet there's distinctions. Like God creates, but he creates through the Son. And it's the power of the Spirit that brings it about. I mean, it's like really, they're very defined in their functions and what they do. For example, Christ right now, in dying on the cross and doing what he's doing, he's bringing all creation back into oneness. And when he does that, he will hand it to the Father.
Oh, I thought it was.
So I mean, it's just profound
I
how
thought it was the opposite way.
they really have like a function. They all have unique functions. But I'm saying that's why it's worth reading this stuff. That's why for me it's not as vague anymore, because I've read so many books on Trinity that I'm like, no, it begins to, I get it. I understand that there's this threeness, and yet there's a oneness about it. you know, but there is no correlation here on this earth.
I do have to say that just now when you said, you know, God creates, but He creates through Jesus, and then the Spirit brings the thing. It can make us things like it's a step process. You know, like, you know, kind of, it makes you feel like God tells Jesus, form the body, and then tell the Holy Spirit to breathe into it. But I think what it is, whatever creation is happening instantaneous. It's not like God does His part, then Jesus come and do His part. You know, picture like a surgery. Someone comes and he cuts you, then this person comes and they do this, and then the next person stitches you back up. It's not like that. I feel like it all happens instantaneous. Three all work functioning in unison. Unity. Yeah.
But yet the Bible breaks it down so you can see the three. You know, like again, God said, and we find that in the Testament that Jesus is the Word. So God says, God speaks through Christ. Christ is the one that He's instrumentally using to create. And yet also you hear that the Spirit of God hovers above the waters and brings life to it. So it's like, wow, you know, there's all three of them are there, which of course is what also is happening in the birth of Christ, with the Father, Son, and the Spirit hovering over, you know, Mary. There's a new creation coming about, and that's exactly what John is trying to tell us. That there's a new creation. No, not John. Sorry, Matthew. He's trying to tell us that there's a new creation coming as well. But yes, But you're right. I don't believe that's like, yeah. I think it's only broken down for us. Just like
God can do anything.
Just like if you want to get blown away, God is already in the future. This is all past tense for Him. There's no continuity for Him that way. It's not like, oh, there's a past, present, and future for Him. He's not bound by time. So He's already there. He's billions of years away from us. Even though He knows we're here and He's here with us, He's still not bound like us. So that's, you know, yeah, it's mind-boggling.
It's a deep thought.
Yeah, it's awesome stuff. See, can we any other question? Yeah, I should stop here. We'll stop there, and we'll take it to verse 9. Even though I'm gonna break off for the third metaphor, but you guys will remember that we did two metaphors, and then we'll come into the third next week. Any other questions? But I think that's why it's good to not only, like, you know, you look at the Trinity, study it. But theology, that's why it's so worthwhile to me, at least I believe, to study theology, because like biblical knowledge, what we're doing here is learning the Bible. Or here's what Thessalonians said, what Paul said in Thessalonians, Corinthians, but then trying to put it all together into like not only a biblical theology, but a systematic theology. How do all these thoughts come together? How does this all work out? And like when I read the theologians, I'm like, wow, it's profound how they're trying to take all these pieces and then put them together and make sense of all of them. And I think it helps us for our own thoughts. Like again, Paul does think that way. Paul is aware of the future. He speaks about us being seated with Christ. So but we just take it for granted. We don't see the intensity that he knows that for God, all these things are just as real as this moment is for us. That God is not limited. God knows exactly what's going to happen.
But is Paul speaking, or